Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Urha. Let's jump right in. Chapter 44, This Venerable One Doesn't Want to Owe You. Daishin Liu did not get a chance to respond before his expression twisted and he clutched his head in pain, mouth open in a soundless scream. But even though he couldn't make any sounds, the agonized screams were practically audible in that horrifying expression and those bulging eyes. Save me! Save me! His lips twisted into an inconceivable shape, bloody veins spreading quickly across his eyeballs. If not for those chains shackling him in place, he likely would have already vaulted up and violently ended his own life. I beg of you, hurry and destroy me! It seemed that Daishin Liu's grasp on his consciousness was nearing its limit. He struggled in agony, but to no avail as a black fog surged out from the smelting pool, crashing into and attacking the body trapped inside. The chains rattled sharply as sparks flew. Seeing this rapid turn of events, Chuaning moved quickly, long sleeves sweeping as he shielded the disciples behind himself. How can I save you? Daishin Liu moved slowly, but he could still control the molten metal in the pool. More rows of ancient kanji script formed in the air. I am about to lose my consciousness and attack you. It is not my intention to hurt you, but it is out of my control and there is no time to explain. The only thing I can do for you now is to apprise you of the techniques at my disposal. Pray take care. The molten metal suddenly reformed. I am well versed in 3 techniques. First, Sweetest Dream, a nightmare technique that puts those afflicted to sleep and grants that which they desire in a wondrous dream. As such, even those with strong spiritual powers who could perceive it to be an illusion would still willingly remain therein, never to wake. Second, Temptation of the Heart, using that most coveted by a person as enticement, induces the afflicted to slaughter one another. Third, Heart Pluck. But his spiritual energies became exhausted at that moment, and he could no longer control the molten metal to form more words. And, just like that, the effects of the heart pluck technique were left to the unknown. A mist of blood exploded from the struggling Daishin Liu. No longer able to control the molten metal, he dragged his finger through the spilled blood, a pair of bulging, spasming eyeballs fixed on Chuaning, refusing to yield. Shizun! Xuanmeng hurriedly grabbed him as he made to approach. Don't go! It might be a trap! Daishin Liu, unable to speak, could only hold up that finger dipped in blood. Abruptly, tears welled up in his eyes. Chuaning, you want me to go over? Daishin Liu nodded slowly. Shizun! Xuanmeng tried to stop him once again, but Chuaning only shook his head at him before approaching the smelting pool by himself and extending a hand. Daishin Liu seemed quite touched. He glanced deeply at Chuaning and struggled to wave his flesh-dangling arms, as if trying to bow. Then, enduring the searing agony, he grabbed Chuaning's hand and wrote shakily on his palm. Draw your lots, break the nightmare. Do not lose sight of your heart. Once the nightmare is broken, the trial ends. He hadn't yet finished writing the last word when he suddenly crumpled bonelessly like a pile of mud and fell back into the boiling, smelting pool, disappearing from view. Simultaneously, an enormous wave of scarlet rose from the pool with a loud crash, the molten metal surging into the sky as 9 pillars of flame, each formed in the shape of a dragon, roared up from the ground. Chuaning was forced to retreat, the fire reflecting in his eyes. Suddenly, 4 tokens zoomed out from the fiery pillars of molten metal to hang in midair. Shimei, remembering Daishin Liu's words from earlier, said at once, Are these the tokens for drawing lots that Daishin Liu mentioned? He stepped closer, but Chuaning stopped him. Don't touch it. All of you get behind me. Shimei, Shizun. I'm here. It'll be okay, Chuaning said. Don't take any chances. Let me go first. He spoke mildly, even without much intonation, but Moran's heart quivered. For some reason, the Chuaning before his eyes suddenly overlapped with that heartless person from his previous lifetime, the one who coldly watched his own disciple die. If he could say something like this, then why did he stand by and do nothing in the past as his disciple died? Moran suddenly felt like he had never understood Chuaning. He also muttered, despite himself, Shizun. Chuaning paid them no mind as he lifted a hand and picked one of the tokens out of the air. The token was made of jade, light yellow in color. He looked it over front and back, quietly muttering. What's wrong? Shuemeng asked. Chuaning said, There's nothing on it. How could that be? Shuemeng was puzzled. Let me try. They each picked one of the 4 tokens. Shuemeng and Shinmei's jade tokens were the same as Chuaning's, with not a word written thereon. Moran's eyes widened as he flipped his token over. Blast? The other 3 looked toward him at once. Shuemeng frowned. What's a blast? Moran jabbed a finger at his token. That's what it says. Shuemeng shuffled over to take a look, and immediately started hollering angrily. Pah! More like you just read the half that you could actually read. It's blood hourglass, Chuaning said abruptly. He could read the majority of ancient kanji script, and wouldn't make things up if he wasn't sure. So if that's what he says is written on the token, then that's what's written on the token. Moran stared blankly. What does blood hourglass mean? Chuaning shook his head. I don't know. As if in answer, a low rumbling sound came from the arsenal's towering roof, and a massive copper hourglass molted with rust descended. Unlike other hourglasses, this one had a cross mounted on it, its purpose unknown. Chuaning glanced at the hourglass, then looked down at the token in Moran's hand. Blood hourglass. He suddenly understood what was meant by draw your lots. Chuaning's expression shifted abruptly as he shouted in a stern tone, Moran, hurry and throw the token away! The order left no room for argument, but even without knowing the reason, Moran moved to obey almost subconsciously. He wouldn't have known without trying, but now that he was trying, Moran found that the jade token was somehow stuck firmly to his hand, and he couldn't even fling it off. Chuaning's cursed under his breath and rushed forward to trade his own token for Moran's, but at that moment, dozens of thorny vines suddenly burst forth from that rusty hourglass and headed straight for Moran. Move! Shizun! Shizun! Blood splattered everywhere. At the last second, Chuaning had shoved Moran aside, but the thorns pierced into Chuaning like so many arrows. Moran and his youthful body was no match for the force of Chuaning's push, but as he stumbled backwards and fell to the ground, the sound of tearing flesh was horrifyingly clear, and Shuemeng and Shinmei's twisted screams were loud and shrill. No way! How could this be? But this was Chuaning, the one who beat him and scolded him, who never looked at him kindly, the one who callously watched his own disciple die right in front of him, the one who coldly said, deficient by nature but beyond remedy, the one who... Moran looked up. Amidst the chaos, he saw the blood soaking through that person's robes. Sharp, densely packed vines pierced from his back all the way through to the front, at the exact same place where he had been injured by the ghost mistress before. The old wound had not yet healed, and was now once again ripped into a bloody mess. The one who protected him with his own body in the coffin, who didn't make a sound even as the claws stabbed through him. The one who, hiding under the bridge, secretly put up a barrier to shield everyone from the rain and the wind, who dared not show his face. The one who, after Shinmei's death in the previous lifetime, went to the kitchen and clumsily made wontons so that he might eat something. The one who has such a bad temper and not much of a way with words, who's afraid of the bitterness of medicine and coughs from spicy food. The one he knows the best. The one he never remembered to look after, whom he hated with gritted teeth, yet also felt was quite pitiful. Chuaning, Wanning, Shizun! Moran screamed as he scrambled toward him. Shizun! Your token. Chuaning's hand shook as he lifted it. His face was pale, but his expression was steady as always. Trade with me. The hand he extended toward Moran held his own blank token. He raised it slowly, with difficulty. His entire arm trembled minutely with pain. His eyes were bright and resolute beneath the layer of wetness. Hurry, give it to me! Moran hadn't even gotten up. He half crawled, half dragged himself to Chuaning and stared helplessly at that horrifying wound. No! Shizun! Shizun! Shuemeng and Shinmei moved to come over as well. Chuaning's expression was one of exasperation as he erected a barrier with a brandish to keep them out, and then called harshly, Tianwen! Tianwen appeared as called, slicing clean through the dozens of vines piercing through Chuaning. But those vines were no ordinary entity. Chuaning could clearly feel them devouring his spiritual energy from where they were buried into his flesh. Having no other choice, he could only grit his teeth, grip the broken ends of those vines, and, steeling himself, rip them out. A rush of blood spilled out instantly. Chuaning tossed the vines aside and let out a breath, then quickly tapped his meridians, temporarily stopping the blood loss. Then he leveled a glare at Moran, voice hoarse. "Give it to me." "Shizun! Trade tokens with me," Chuaning said harshly. By now, Moran had also figured out what blood hourglass meant. The curse left by Gochen millions of years ago was no different from how he had tormented Chuaning in the previous life. Indeed, whether god, demon, human, or ghost, they all came up with more or less the same thing when trying to be as cruel as can be. Blood hourglass. Pour the blood of a person into the hourglass in place of sand or water to keep time. The time interval ends when the person is bled dry. At his coronation ceremony as Ta Xianjun in the last life, hadn't he used Chuaning as a blood hourglass, made him watch while he tread on the remaining sects as he ascended the throne, had him bled out drop by drop in front of him? But in this life, in front of Gochen's blood hourglass, Chuaning was willing to trade him his own safe token, willing to go on the cross in his place. Moran's heart beat out of rhythm in his chest. He couldn't even think. How could this be? How could this be? The copper hourglass missed its first strike and failed to grab a person. It brandished its thorny vines, ramping up for a second attack. Chuaning stared at him, eyes flickering with the light that trembled faintly. His face was pale from the pain as he panted softly. "Moran, listen to me. Hurry and trade me." "Hurry." Chuaning's face was pale as fresh snow lit by moonlight. "Are you trying to make me block a second attack for you?" "Shizun!" The vines shot out again. In that instant, Moran finally raised his token, and Chuaning reached for it without thinking. But unexpectedly, right as their hands were about to touch, Moran's eyes flashed as he pulled his hand back and instead turned to shield the unguarded Chuaning behind himself. The second wave of vines had reached them by then, and Moran met them head-on. His whole body was wrapped up and swallowed by the vines in an instant, and dragged to the copper hourglass. "Moran!" Dozens of vines coiled around and pinned him tightly to the cross. Moran turned to look toward Chuaning. His lips moved. Chuaning's eyes widened abruptly. Moran's voice was quiet, but he heard it clearly. There was no mistake. He said, "Shizun, I'm really not beyond remedy. So please don't give up on me." But he couldn't finish the rest of the sentence. Last life, he wanted to say it, but didn't. This life, it was already too late. Whether Chuaning gave up on him or not really wasn't important to him anymore. He just didn't want to owe this person, that's all. He was really too dumb, and already couldn't figure out just what it was he felt toward Chuaning. He didn't want things to get even more muddled. This life, Moran thought to himself, the one he cared about, the one he liked, was Shimei and no other. He didn't want to exchange tokens with Chuaning only because he didn't want to owe him a favor, only because he didn't want to see Chuaning bleed out again. His heart wasn't made of stone. Nothing made him happier than to have someone nice to him. A little kindness and his smile would be brilliant as the spring. But if it's a lot of kindness, then he'd willingly die without complaint. Suddenly, out of the dense vines came a glistening sword. The sword was undoubtedly a holy weapon. It was ancient, but carried an overwhelming aura of valor. A pair of rings flanked the hilt, and the pommel was etched with thorn patterns. The sword was slender, with an intricate effigy of a bull-headed dragon embedded therein, the blade coursing with an azure radiance that could slice clean through everything from the softest hair to the toughest metal. Moran only had enough time to see the Gochen written on the sword, not even the exalted, before the sword of the god of weaponry stabbed directly into his chest. Blood gushed out into the hourglass. At the same time, a curtain of water suddenly poured down in the arsenal, separating Moran and the others on two sides, the abrupt torrential deluge trapping everyone else on the other side. Shimei yelled, "Aran! Aran!" The rapid downpour blocked their line of sight. They couldn't clearly see how Moran was holding up on the other side. Chuaning tried over and over to break through the water, but was pushed out again and again, until he was drenched all the way through, eyes dark on an anxious face, lips wholly without color. Chuaning's voice was hoarse. "Moran!" It wasn't very loud, but shook terribly. He himself did not notice, but Shimei startled and turned to look at him. only to see the usually calm and composed Shizun soaked and disheveled, his long feathery eyelashes trembling as he failed to suppress his emotions, and worry colored his features. He summoned Tianwen, savagery written between his brows, like a bowstring stretched taut. Shinmei held onto him with unease. "Shizun, stop it! There's no way to get through!" Chuaning shook him off, eyes sharp as blades, and silently raised a barrier to try again. But the waterfall was infused with the ample spiritual energies of Jinchang Lake. Not only was he unable to break through, the water beat down on him like 1,000 arrows, cutting and piercing. Already weakened from his grave injuries earlier, this intense impact made it hard to remain standing. He clutched his chest and tried to endure, but was still forced down to one knee, face pale as the wounds on his back tore open and started seeping blood. There was no way to tell if the wetness on Shinmei's face was water or tears. He cried in distress, "Shizun, all this, for what?" "What do you mean, for what? If it was you or Shuemeng back there," Chuaning spat, "I would also." It really hurt too much. Frowning, he couldn't finish the sentence. Unexpectedly, a sword suddenly flashed from behind the waterfall, effortlessly parting the torrential downpour in half like cutting tofu. The energy of that sword was extraordinary and immense. It slashed right toward exactly where Shinmei stood, and was just about to hit him when Chuaning waved his sleeve and used the entire remainder of his spiritual energy to erect a protective barrier around Shinmei. He coughed up a mouthful of blood from overexertion. A deep and clear male voice rang out unhurriedly, reverberating inside the holy weapon arsenal. "I am the god of weaponry, Gochen the Exalted. How dare ye crooks trespass on the forbidden territory of holy weapons." End of chapter. Okay, author's notes. Today's mini theater. What did everyone buy on Double 11? Double 11 is a Chinese Black Friday. Moran. Oil, salt, sauce, vinegar, pretty plates, cute pots, and yummy snacks. That's cute. Shinmei. Everybody is buying stuff. If I order anything, I will only add workload to the delivery man. Though the general outcome won't change just because I don't purchase anything, but every step counts. I won't buy anything. Oh, Shinmei is so sweet. Shuemeng, clothing, arm guard, hair ribbon, and hair clasp. Path for geniuses after 20, complete hardcover edition. Chuaning, how to raise someone's IQ, complete hardcover edition. Note, please mail to Shisheng Peak Disciple Dormitory, recipient Moran. Sent anonymously, thanks. What a clown. He's clowning Moran, wow. Let's show these two characters that they are not formally introduced but are named in the side character listing. Can roughly guess some personalities. Mei Han Shui, 300 pairs of Jade Lovers pendant bulk purchase, 500 embroidered silk pouch, 5,000 sets of boutique hair accessories from Yi Wu Commodity Wholesale. Ye Wang Shi, nothing. Okay, so to recap chapter 44, they didn't get to, they were given a token, and it turns out that one of the tokens had the blood hourglass symbol on it, and Moran was the one that accidentally picked it up, and so these vines were going toward him and trying to restrain him. But Shizun, our dear Shizun, jumped in front of the vines and ended up getting stabbed through to protect Moran. Now Moran is having some PTSD flashbacks. He remembered using the blood hourglass technique on Chuaning in his past life, so he decided that he would not trade his token with Shizun and he would bear the responsibility of being captured because he didn't want to, quote-unquote, owe his Shizun, when in reality, he just didn't want to see Shizun get any more hurt than he already was. So now, Gochen the Exalted showed up, but this Gochen seems to be speaking differently than the Gochen that we've encountered previously. Is it the same one, or is this mayhaps the real Gochen the Exalted? We shall see as we continue into chapter 45. Okay. Chapter 45. This venerable one knew you would come. Shuemeng raged skywards. What kind of shitty god are you? You effing blind? Where do you see us trespassing? We're the ones that got snatched. Get your damn facts straight. Shinmei said, It's no use. He isn't actually here. This is just a voice he left behind. The fake Gochen must have addled Zaixin Liu's judgment to make him see us as unscrupulous trespassers. The voice continued. Those befitting of holy weapons ought to understand virtue and resolve as a matter of course, ought to be unsusceptible to the allure of fantastical illusions, and capable of staying true to thy heart. Since thou hast come, thou must undertake my trial. If thou dost pass, I shall offer thee safe passage and a holy weapon. But if thou art selfish and faltering, then thou art unfit to be the master of a holy weapon. Chuaning uttered darkly between blood-stained lips, Virtue. Is this so-called virtue of yours using someone as a blood hourglass? Of course, he knew that Gochen the Exalted couldn't actually hear, but even still, anger drove him to spit the words out. Even if every utterance made him breathe harshly and pulled on his wounds, he just couldn't control that unrelenting mouth of his. The voice, heedless, continued to reverberate in the arsenal. As a test of thy temperament, all of ye shall be imminently submerged in Zaixin Liu's dream illusion. If thou dost fail to wake from the illusion in time, thy companion shall bleed out and perish. The color drained from all three of their faces at these words. Shumei muttered, What? So, in other words, the three of them were about to be plunged into an illusion, and if they didn't manage to wake in time, then they would become eternally entranced within a wondrous dream, while Moran bled out in reality. Xuemeng was dumbstruck for a moment before bellowing fiercely, What kind of god even are you? If cultivating into an immortal means ending up like you, I won't deign to touch another sword for the rest of my life. Chuaning also snapped, What absurdity! Shizun! Shumei hurriedly tried to calm him. Don't get angry. Please mind your injury. But Gochen the Exalted, that bastard, chose this moment to start leisurely reciting poetry. Water poured upon even ground doth stream each its own way. Life is predestined. Even if thou dost sigh as thou walketh and brood as thou leeth. Fill thy cup as comfort, song interrupted by toast, yet the road remains ever arduous. The heart is not of wood or stone, how could it be unfeeling? Words unspoken and steps untread, nothing left to say. Xuemeng was seriously about to pass out from anger. What the hell are you mumbling about? Shumei explained. It's from Difficult Paths by Bao Dao. The general meaning is that each person has their own fate. Why wallow in remorse and drink for relief? The toast interrupting the song. Since people's hearts are not made of stone, it's impossible to have no feelings, and many things go unsaid. Gochen the Exalted let out a long sigh. How many people in this vast world would be willing to abandon a perfect dream just to save another? The world is filled with such incessant war and slaughter. If a holy weapon were to fall into unscrupulous hands, the fault would be mine. And how could I, the very creator of weapons, forgiveth myself for the sins of such? Suddenly, the holy weapon arsenal grew dim, and the tinkling parts flying through the air ceased all movement. A faint light came from above, as if the stars of a resplendent sky were slowly descending one by one, their light illuminating the ground. An intangible voice in the air whispered, Sleep. The softly translucent light seemed to have some kind of hypnotizing effect. Shumei and Xuemeng's cultivations were lower, and they quickly sank into slumber. Sleep. Chuaning gritted his teeth and stubbornly forced himself to resist, but the power of a founding god was insurmountable, and in the end he was ultimately unable to hold out against the lull, and fell into a dream as well. Meanwhile, inside the holy weapon arsenal, as the blood hourglass, Moran was the only one still awake. Blood bubbled up when he coughed. Across the diminished waterfall, he could vaguely see the three trapped in dreams. Chuaning, Shumei, and Xuemeng, all asleep. He heard Gochen's words, and knew that the only way to break the spell, and the only way for him to be saved, was for one of them to wake in time. But the time inched past, his head grew dizzier and his body felt colder, and no one awoke. Maybe what goes around comes around. This was how he treated Chuaning in the previous life, and now it was his turn to feel his blood draining away, drop by drop. How very laughable. Amongst them, who could possibly abandon the best dream of their life about the thing they most wanted to have just to come save him? Xuemeng definitely wouldn't. Chuaning, never mind, not gonna think about him. If anyone, it should probably be Shumei. He mused woozily, but he had already lost too much blood, and his hold on consciousness was beginning to slip. Moran lowered his head and looked down below his feet. The blood that had drained into the bottom of the copper hourglass mixed with the water inside, dyeing the gleaming liquid a faint red. He suddenly wondered, if he also fell into Gochen's illusion, what would he see? Would he dream of delicate translucent wontons, Shumei's gentle smile, Chuaning's praise and approval, and the sight when he first arrived at Shisheng Peak, of high-tongue flowers drifting across the sky, carried by the breeze. Moran. He heard someone calling him. Moran's head remained drooping. He felt like he was about to pass out. Maybe he was already hallucinating, hearing things. Moran. Moran! It wasn't an illusion. He abruptly lifted his head. His pupils contracted at the sight that greeted him. His voice was almost hoarse as he cried, Shumei! It was Shumei! The one who woke up from the dream, who abandoned perfection and gave up happiness, who, even when everything was exactly as wished for, still remembered him. Was Shumei. Watching that fragile person cross the waterfall and walk toward him, Moran suddenly felt himself choking up. Shumei, you... He wasn't sure what to say. Moran closed his eyes, voice hoarse. Thank you. Even in a blissful dream, you still remembered me. Shumei waded through the water, his eyes and brows even more strikingly black against his soaked clothes. His looks were gentle like the first time Moran had seen him, gentle like the countless dreams in which he had appeared in the previous lifetime, gentle like the way he remembered him when his whole body felt cold and he had naught else to reach for. Shumei said, Don't be silly, what are you thanking me for? Only when he got close did Moran notice that his feet were bleeding. He didn't know when the ground had become scalding hot. Gochen the Exalted seemed intent on testing just how far a person would be willing to go for their companion, and the allure of the dream was trailed by ruthless torment. Shumei's boots had already been burnt through. If he didn't walk, the ground would stay as is, but if he insisted on walking forward, then every step would be accompanied by a surge of flames underfoot, not too hot as to directly render him unable to move, but enough to be searingly agonizing. But that gentle person, himself clearly in pain, only glanced down once before his gaze grew even more unwavering and he walked toward Moran, one foot in front of the other. Moran, hold on just a little longer, he said. I'll get you down from there. Their eyes met, and Moran knew there was no point in saying, don't come. His gaze was far too determined, far too persistent. He had never seen this kind of expression on Shumei's face before. If Moran was in a calmer state, he surely would have found it strange. Shumei had always called him Moran. When had he ever called him Moran? He was so fixated on Shumei's kindness to him that he altogether failed to realize that the person in front of him right now wasn't Shumei at all, but Chu Wanning. Yep. The ancient willow's last technique was called heart pluck. This so-called heart pluck was an exchange of the heart and spirit between two people. When Chu Wanning broke free of the dream and woke up, he found that he had switched places with Shumei. Zaixian Liu's magic had transferred his consciousness into Shumei's body, and likely vice versa, but Shumei remained asleep, and so had no idea that he had switched bodies. Chu Wanning had no time to explain, and Moran, completely unaware of the truth, thought that the person before him was really Shumei. He firmly believed that Shumei would definitely endure the pain and make it to him, just like how he couldn't forget his kindness even through death. People were stubborn creatures. But it was really too cruel. When Chu Wanning finally arrived at the copper hourglass and started climbing up the towering vine toward Moran, countless tiny, burning thorns suddenly sprouted from the vine. Chu Wanning was caught off guard, hands burned and pierced all at once. He tried to grab on and keep climbing. The Shumei's body and cultivation were both weak, and the thorns sliced through the skin and flesh of his hands as he pummeled down the vine. Chu Wanning cursed under his breath, brows furrowed in pain. This useless body of Xi Mingjing's. Moran, Shumei! Chu Wanning tumbled to the ground on his knees, his skin instantly scalding where it touched the ground. Brows drawn tight, he bit down on his lip out of habit and refused to cry. This kind of expression would look stubborn and fierce on his own face, but on Shumei's gentle, beautiful face was somehow only heart-rending instead. He really couldn't compare after all. Shumei! Moran opened his mouth to speak, but tears rolled down instead. His heart felt like it was being cut with knives. Through his blurry vision, he watched that thin and frail body, that frail person, slowly, bit by bit, climbing up the vine. The thorns pierced his hands, the flames burnt his flesh. Everything was dyed scarlet, a trail of smeared bloodstains in his wake. Moran closed his eyes, blood bubbling up in his throat. He choked, and every word trembled. Shumei. That person was close now. Moran saw a brief flash of pain in his eyes. He really seemed to be in a lot of pain. Even Moran's voice seemed to be a kind of torment to him. His expression was unwavering, but those eyes could almost be described as pleading, "Don't call out to me anymore." Moran, hold on just a bit more. I'm getting you down from there. As he spoke, his eyes glinted with determination, like the unsheathing of a blade. Beautiful beyond words on that usually gentle face. Chuaning's robes billowed as he leapt onto the copper hourglass. His face was weighed, and he stood unsteadily, almost on the edge of collapse. Other than the rise and fall of his chest, he seemed little different from the dead. In that moment, Moran felt like it'd be better for him to just bleed out and die than for him to have to suffer like this. Even his voice came out shattered. "I'm sorry." Chuaning knew that this sorry wasn't for him. He wanted to explain, but glancing at the exalted Gochen's silvery blue sword protruding from Moran's chest, the sword likely being the source of spiritual energy for the vines, he worried that Moran might injure himself further from shock if he were to explain, and so he continued pretending to be his shimei, asking, "Moran, do you trust me?" "I trust you," without hesitation. Chuaning shot him a glance from beneath his lashes and gripped the hilt. The sword was close to the main artery. The slightest slip would cost Moran his life. Chuaning's hand trembled a little where it wrapped around the sword and didn't move. The rims of Moran's eyes were still red, but he suddenly smiled. "Shumei." Moran. "Am I about to die?" "You won't." "If I'm about to die, then can I hold you?" He said it so cautiously, his eyes glistening with wetness, that Chuaning's heart softened despite himself. But remembering that the person in Moran's eyes was actually someone else, that softness instantly froze over again. He suddenly felt like the insignificant comic relief on the stage of a play, obscured behind the beautiful flowing sleeves of the female lead, going totally unnoticed. In this touching and heartwarming narrative, he was unneeded, unwanted. Or maybe his only use was to wear the ugly face of the clown, and, with an exaggerated smile painted on, act as a foil to the joys and sorrows, the love and hate of other people. How very laughable. But Moran knew nothing of his thoughts. He saw the flicker in Chuaning's eyes and thought it was Shumei's unwillingness, and quickly said, "Just for a little while. A little while is enough." A soft sigh, barely audible. "Actually, Moran." "What is it?" "Never mind," Chuaning said. "It's nothing." He leaned closer, but not too close for fear of accidentally bumping that sword. Then he reached out and gently wrapped an arm around Moran's shoulder. He heard Moran whispering by his ear, "Shumei, thank you for waking up. Thank you for still remembering me even in that dream." Chuaning looked down, eyelashes trembling like the fluttering of a butterfly's wings. Then he smiled faintly. "Don't mention it." A pause. Then he said, "Moran." Chuaning held him, caressing his hair, as if still in a dream, and sighed softly. "Did you know the most wonderful dreams are rarely ever real?" Then he pulled away, the hug briskly over like the light touch of a dragonfly on water. Moran looked up. He didn't really understand what Shumei meant. All he knew was that the brief hug was Shumei's kindness to him, a piece of candy given out of pity, sweet and sour, a hint of tartness against his tongue. The instant that sword was pulled out, blood blossomed in the air like so many high-tongue flowers blown from the branches by a fierce gale. A sharp agony ripped through Moran's chest. He thought he was about to die, and everything he couldn't let go of flooded his thoughts at once. He suddenly blurted out, "Shumei, actually, I've always liked you. And you?" With the sound of the sword falling to the ground, the vines dissipated in an instant. The tumultuous downpour of water abruptly ceased, and the holy weapon arsenal returned to its former tranquility. "I've always liked you. And you?" Moran's body had reached its limits, and darkness swept across his vision. A pair of blood-stained hands caught him as he fell into Shumei's arms. He didn't know if he was seeing things, but Shumei's thin eyebrows were drawn together as he slowly closed his eyes, and a glistening wetness seemed to slide slowly down. He seemed to hear Shumei softly whisper, "I as well." Moran. He must be seeing things. Why else would Shumei look so miserable as he answered, "I also like you." Finally unable to hold out any longer, Moran sunk into unconsciousness. End of chapter 45. Okay. So, wow, that was emotional. So Moran got captured, and the other three, Shuemeng, Shimei, and Chuaning, were thrown into a dream world. But Chuaning was able to wake up. However, his soul was switched with Shimei's soul, so Chuaning ended up in Shimei's body. So when he got up and broke free from the dream world and went to go save Moran, Moran thought that it was Shimei that was saving him. And so he asked Shimei for a hug. He talked about how much he loves Shimei, and Chuaning is having his heart broken over and over again. At the end, before Moran passed out, Moran confessed, saying that, Shimei, I like you. And Chuaning replies as well that he likes Moran as well because it's true, but he says it in a miserable state because he knows that Moran doesn't like him back. He likes Shimei and not himself. So I'm like, poor Shizun has to go through so much. He got stabbed for Moran. He got his feet burned for Moran. He got his hands pierced by vines for Moran. And Moran, this dumb husky, is like, is it you, Shimei? I knew you would come for me. I love you, Shimei. No one would love me as much as you would. Dumbass. I'm sorry, it's just that Moran is so dumb. And Chuaning is also kind of dumb for liking someone this dumb. Oh, I feel so bad for Chuaning. Anyway, now Moran is freed. Now, and Chuaning is awake. Now he has to wake up his other two disciples. So, let's see what happens. You'll see what happens in the next read-along. I hope you guys enjoyed today's 2 chapters, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!